wasn't that far back, was it? Wolf,
Yeah.
Wolf
Wolf and
was the
Montcalm.
Plains of Abraham.
Plains
What was
of
the
Abraham.
date?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I thought it
Are
was
you kidding?
18th century.
No. Well, it might have been 18th
No, I
century.
really do,
Not the
because I
1800s,
think there's
but-
a really good crime novel by a. I learned all my best stuff from reading mystery, but seriously, Jerry Boyle was an author I really like who lives in New Hampshire, I think. One of his most interesting books had to do with the fact that if Benedict Arnold had I think it was Arnold, had successfully led the expeditionary force through Maine that he was charged with, if he had managed to get to Quebec in time, then the victory might have gone differently, and Canada might have would have had a different result. But I was fairly sure that all those great paintings of Wolfe and Montcalm, the two generals who clashed right there below the chateau,
And both died.
Frontenac, on the Plains of Abraham. I thought that was 18th century, but maybe
Well, and
not.
and it may be, and this is another interesting thing in that, as a Canadian, we don't know our history. I know that Quebec was founded in the early 1600s.
Right, it was.
But Plains of Abraham, a pivotal moment in all of Canadian history, and I couldn't tell you, obviously, even what century it happened in. I do know it happened.
Right, a lot of it.
And I know who won.
Yeah, well, that's good. You know the outcome. A lot of it was a very strong, just as the Spanish sent priests. Or monks or friars or whatever you want to do. I'm never totally clear about all the distinctions. But anyway, there was a tremendous religious oomph to the Spanish occupation of the Southwest and, coming up through California and whatever. So it was true, I think, in Eastern Canada from the French side. There was a lot of Jesuit, a lot of, and women supporting it too. It wasn't just men, but it was also religious women as well as religious men.
Nuns.
Right, and the British were more secular, always. And so there are pockets, I find, in Eastern Canada, where you get a very Catholic, a very sort of different feeling than you get in other parts of Canada, which were not under the various, was it like well, I'm trying to think who were and some of them went down the Mississippi. Lord, now I'm having a complete Marquette. That sort of thing. So it's all been very tangled, and I've actually kind of wondered, the reason I was going through this boring exercise, I've kind of wondered whether in some of the gamache, whether you might be touching or plan to touch on some of these elements. You've obviously tapped into the Francophone here in Manoir Bellechasse, but...
Well, one of the elements, I'm actually off to Quebec City for a month on Friday, because one of my upcoming books is going to be set three-quarters. Most of the action will be in Quebec City, and some of it will be back in this fictional village I've created called Three Pines. In that, one of the subtexts of the story will be the search for Champlain's body. Now, Samuel Champlain was the founder, the father of Canada, but in so doing, he was actually the father of Quebec, which was the first settlement, Quebec City, in Canada. He arrived in the early 1600s and created this colony. And they found all sorts of bodies. There's gravestones and markers, and we all know where the Jesuits, where the priests, where the nuns, where the lieutenants are buried, the governors and everybody else. But there's one man who ran the colony, who founded it, who was the father of our nation, who we know died in Quebec. Don't know where he is. They've never found his body. So there is this fascination in French Canada, and specifically in the province of Quebec, and totally within Quebec City, of where is he buried. And Quebec City is actually very small. There's not that many choices. It's a walled city. It's an exquisite city.
It is a beautiful city.
It is a beautiful city. And every now and then, an amateur archaeologist will say, well, you know where? I know where he's buried. He's buried here or here, and they get permits to dig, and which isn't an easy thing in a walled city to dig, because you don't have a lot of space. So some poor restaurant has to close for 2 weeks while they dig underneath, thinking that they found Champlain, and they've never found him. But they know he's buried somewhere. They know he's there somewhere, and it's a mystery. And they're trying archaeologically and with all the little clues throughout all the documents that are left to try to figure out, and why did no one write it down? I mean, there's a big question of what happened.
That is truly, isn't Lake Champlain in New York named
Yes.
also? So,
Yeah.
I mean,
He did
that-
a lot of traveling. He mapped a
did,
lot
but,
of that area.
There was, I don't think that the political boundaries were all that fixed, so that
No,
you could
you're
range
right.
around, while it was all sort of woods and rivers and all the rest of it. But good, and you'll be able to find, check.
I will
I'll,
find
I'll check in
Champlain.
your book. No, but I was thinking I'll check in your book to
I'll let
discover
you
which
know.
century all of this
Oh,
nonsense
that.
was.
Well,
here,
I'll
but-
find out. I think by Friday or Saturday. One of the things that Quebec City has is a chief archaeologist, which I think is
Really?
really cool. And he's an Anglophone, a guy named William Moss. So I'm meeting up with him, and he's going to walk me
fun.
through it.
I wonder
I'll
if
ask
he
him.
has a really good stonemason. One of my fondest memories is sitting in the city of Conwy in Wales, and I had just been through this wonderful castle, one of those Edward I Marcher castles. One of the great ones is at Conwy, and I was sitting out at on the city wall, because you can still go around it, like York has still got walls, whatever. Sort of kicking my heels against the wall. I discovered I was sitting next to the city's chief mason, who proceeded to tell me that the most difficult thing that he faces is the fact that nobody wants to be a mason. So that trying to maintain the walls, I'm really serious,
No,
trying to
I
maintain
can
these old
imagine.
stone walls and everything was an incredibly difficult prospect on many levels.
When he's the only one.
Part of
Or
it
there-
being you just can't get good help, and part of it being funding, and also it might be an interesting thing to ask in Quebec, because how do they keep the
Because
walls?
the whole thing is stone, as you know. It's,
Right.
Everything is stone in Quebec.
Right, and you've got the Frontenac rising up, that marvelous Fairmont Hotel, which was,
Amazing.
and then right below it is this wonderful field, and you can sort of imagine the British scaling up. Isn't that what
Which they
happened?
did.
They scaled up these impossible
Yeah.
heights, to get to the battle scene, and it's terribly picturesque. And
It is. It is. I can hardly wait. I'm looking forward to being there, because it is, as I say, and it's just fall on your knees, beautiful. But I can hardly wait to write about it. I love, because I know not that many people worldwide are really that familiar with Canada, not the reality of Canada, the cliche of Canada, but not the reality. So it gives me just an incredible pleasure to be able to write about what I love.
Well, if you were going to continue to write the Inspector Gamache, which I think you are, because you seem to be most enthusiastic about it, he can't always be solving crimes in Three
In little old
Pines.
Three Pines.
Your little sort of Brigadoon village there in Quebec, which is in a way kind of a metaphor for a lot of things, they think, as well as a fictional place. I have brought today, and thank you again, this wonderful cappuccino mug that you gave me.
You're
And
welcome.
on the mug, in the front, in the back it says Vive Gamache, yay, but on the front you've got the Three Pines, which I think are emblematic of your little village, right?
Thank
sort of
you.
like the maple
They
leaf
are.
is for Quebec and the
That's
Three
right.
Pines are for the village.
For the village. And my assistant Lise designed that, and she's noticed it in some places where we have the Three Pines logo. Now her husband works in the forest, and Lise is also a gardener. So she took me aside at some stage and she said, it probably doesn't matter, but I just want you to know that the logo they're using, not really pines. I don't know. So at
funny.
a fine time to tell me.
Oh, Lord.
She said, these are pines. So then she put together that and organized the whole thing. So we made a limited edition of the mugs. And when I knew we were coming here, I wanted to bring you one.
Well, thank you. I also tried the maple syrup granola, a little bite this morning. It's
Was it
beyond
good?
gorgeous, yes. And it is from Manoir Hovey, which is really, it is the real place where your Manoir Bellechasse in the book, you modeled Manoir
did.
Bellechasse on Manoir Hovey,
It was
right?
inspired by it. What I wanted to do with this book, as you know, is a real tribute to the Golden Age traditional British, the manor house murder. So instead of having all the action happen in this fictional village of Three Pines, I moved the action probably about a valley away. So it's in the same general area of Quebec, quite close to the Vermont border. And so there's this isolated lake, Lac Massawippi, and on it is an old hunting lodge built by the robber barons many, many years ago. Sat abandoned for many years, and then it got taken over and turned into this luxury inn